introduction. So for the benefit of everybody, all the participants, we wanted something a little different for the keynote speech. It's a lot of different things about analytics this morning and this afternoon, but I am also chair of the ITS Canada Advanced Public Transit Systems Committee. And as such, I produced recently a little research piece where I was looking at initiatives that transit agencies have initiated or are participant in that encourage collaboration in order to encourage innovation. And collaboration with academic environments in particular, because that's part of the mandate and objective of TAL. And in so doing, I came across, and I knew about it, but it was more extensive than I had thought, the TransLink Tomorrow program of collaborations. Now, TransLink is among the leaders in the use of data, but this program, this program and this discussion presentation by Graham is a little bit different. It's going to focus, it comes out of their new mobility group, and but they've developed these quite intriguing and innovative approaches to collaboration with both academics and startups to encourage the whole development of new mobility. And so that's the purpose of why we wanted Graham to come and do his presentation to discuss where he's going to discuss, well, he'll discuss a bit about his own background, but also discuss the new mobility program at TransLink, as well as these collaboration programs. So with that, Graham, why don't you take it away?
Thanks so much, Brendan. That's a great introduction. I feel like you so succinctly summarized that even better than I could, and really appreciate the invitation to join you today. Thank you so much for having me. Just want to confirm you can hear and see me, and you can see my presentation okay?
Well, it's not in presentation mode. It's
not?
No, it's in the with the thumbnails on the side.
That's so strange.
At least for me. Amber, do you see it differently?
No, it's not in presentation mode. It's just the.
Even now?
Yeah, even now. Yeah.
I was wondering if Willem sometimes remember this happening once before.
So
I don't know if it's the same problem that Amber has where.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Do you have a second
screens?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I just have one screen, but not in full screen mode.
No. For some reason,
is there another way to go to presentation mode that anyone knows?
Actually, use the icon at the bottom.
Yeah, that's what I do as well. How about now?
I think you can click on the slideshow tab and click the presentation view.
Maybe if you can stop sharing and share again.
Okay, let's try that.
One thing you could try doing is, I don't know if you're sharing this application or sharing your screen, but if you share your screen, you'll certainly get whatever the screen is outputting.
Okay.
It's another
I've
option.
stopped sharing and I'll start sharing again. So you recommended share entire screen, not window?
Well, that'll kind of get rid of any, sorry, application issues.
Okay, let's try that.
So now if you start it, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Okay, let's get started.
Thank you.
Lose time. Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks so much for having me at your Transit Analytics Lab Research Day. Again, my name is Graham. I'm originally from New York and moved to Vancouver about 3 years ago. As this is an academic conference, I wanted to share my background. I have a bachelor's in history of art and architecture, and I have a master's in city and regional planning. I started out with the New York City Department of Transportation in the Manhattan Borough Commissioner's Office, working under Mayor Bloomberg, Jeanette Sadiq Khan at the time. If you're familiar, a lot of bike lanes, plazas, and introduction of city bike share is an exciting time. Later worked with Sam Schwartz Engineering, private consultancy. I was in Germany for a year on a research fellowship looking at sustainable urban mobility plans. Worked for another consultancy in New York, and then an international nonprofit Institute for Transportation Development Policy on a lot of bus rapid transit, transit-oriented development in US and international cities, and then joined TransLink. As many of you are likely familiar, Vancouver is an amazing city in the Pacific Northwest that grew largely as a result of the port, largest and most profitable port in Canada, as well as access to the regional rail system to deliver these goods that are coming in. Good examples of historic architecture, transit-oriented development are very well-known automated electric SkyTrain, which is now expanding, access to nature, and of course, a rich history of Indigenous cultures. On that note, we'd like to acknowledge that we operate on the Indigenous and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and acknowledge that we as a transportation system have a role to play in advancing reconciliation. So TransLink is the regional transportation authority for Metro Vancouver. That includes around 23 municipalities in the Lower Mainland with a population of around 2.6 million people. Today, I'd like to talk about some of our programs and research partnerships, including Transport 2050, our climate action strategy, low carbon fleet strategy, open call for innovation, pilot demonstration projects, and our new mobility lab academic research program. So just a quick announcement: in 2020, the American Public Transportation Association awarded TransLink Transit System of the Year, and we even got a nice shout out from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. So it's an organization that has a lot of smart people and some really ambitious initiatives that I'm very proud to work on. So Transport 2050 is our 30-year vision for Metro Vancouver. This includes strategies and actions to essentially revolutionize the transportation services from your traditional bus, train, ferry. And our goals are to improve convenience, reliability, affordability, safety, and comfort, as well as make the system carbon-free. This was TransLink's largest ever public engagement. So talking about partnerships can also include public participation. This had over 30,000 survey responses, 4,000 unique ideas, 300 plus events, and over 7 languages. And I just love this photo of the young future urban planner testing out one of our VR exhibits, probably flying an electric helicopter or in an automated shuttle or something. So there are over 100 actions to deliver choices. This report is published online. You can Google Transport 2050. We're including over 300 kilometers of rapid transit in the 30-year vision, over 850 kilometers of bike lanes, improving street space allocation for walking, biking, rolling transit, promoting electric and shared vehicles that includes bikes, scooters, and cars, and putting frequent transit within 5 minutes of most people. So there is a transit-oriented development component of this plan. And just recently, as in, I want to say 2 weeks ago, our Mayor's Council and Board approved the 10-year investment plan to fund the first third of this 30-year vision. And here's again a long list of what will be included in prioritizing that first 10 years. So the new mobility team at TransLink, which is the team that I work on, it's 6 people. So we're a small and agile team. We were established in 2017, I want to say, as a mandate from the Mayor's Council and Board to sort of get ahead of the curve with the ACES acronym: automation, connectivity, electrification, and sharing. Our program purpose is to leverage these new transportation technologies and business models to support regional goals and remain competitive with a lot of services that emerge in the private sector, for example. So we act as a facilitator and resource for experimentation. We collaborate with the private and academic sectors, and we act as a competency center to test these new concepts. So the process is essentially to ideate, to prototype, to pilot, and then to integrate into our long-term programs. So this process, to break it down in a bit more detail, includes defining our goals, including challenges, opportunities, testing and refining proof of concept in real-world conditions, as well as scaling these projects to include more customers, and then eventually integrating into our programs, depending on our resources and capacity available at the time. So a few examples of some of these pilots include our mobility as a service or shared mobility compass card. our AI bus prediction pilot, van pool, on-demand microtransit, parcel delivery, capacity information, illuminated signage, and rideshare matching. I'll get into a bit more detail of some of these. Each of these pilots goes through a review process to see how it fits with business and technical feasibility. Organizational learning is important for us, as well as the impact on behavior change for customers to shift to more sustainable travel behavior. Our open call for innovation invites submissions from the private sector to address some of these transportation challenges. In the past, themes have included seamless mobility, customer services and amenities, our region's recovery through the pandemic, regional monitoring and enhancing access, as well as this year's theme is decarbonizing transportation. One example of an open call for innovation project that led to a pilot project is our shared mobility compass card. So the compass card taps you onto the TransLink system, so SkyTrain, bus, ferry or C-bus, and we've integrated with 2 local car share companies, Evo, which is one way, and Moto, which is a round trip, as well as the local bike share system, Mobi. So we have around 2,000 customers currently participating in this pilot, and they can tap onto all of these services. Payment is integrated, trip planning is integrated, and we hope to scale this up even further in the future. For our real-time customer information pilot, we partnered with Nextbus and Transit App to give real information about the crowding information on our transit system to customers. And this was really valuable during the pandemic for folks to make a decision about whether they wanted to board the vehicle or wait for another option. In terms of micromobility, the province of BC has a scooter pilot program that also includes electric bicycles and invites municipalities to participate in this program. So it's a 2-year pilot. Currently, the city and district of North Vancouver have e-bike share with Lime, and the city of Richmond is integrating e-bikes and scooters into their services. So this is something that is also just picking up speed here in Vancouver. A bit of an incremental approach, but great to see for a first last mile to transit connections. Zero emission vehicle infrastructure is also extremely valuable for the transit system to reach our low carbon fleet and climate action strategy goals. So we have a GHG reduction target of 80% by 2050 and 100% renewable fleet by 2050. Currently, we have around 4 battery electric buses. We're procuring 15 more, and we aim to have 500 zero emission buses by 2030. And yes, this fits into our low carbon fleet strategy. In terms of automation, the province of BC Motor Vehicle Act still does not allow for automated vehicle testing on public roads. However, in 2019, the City of Vancouver and City of Surrey had a joint submission to the Infrastructure Canada Smart Cities Challenge, and they did test this Ella Easy Mile automated shuttle on a fixed track in the downtown that customers really enjoyed. And we found that automation can reduce operating costs by up to 90%. However, of course, there are job implications that we want to look into further. So this is something we're partnering with the University of British Columbia to conduct a study on user perceptions of safety and comfort around automation technology currently. Okay, moving on to our New Mobility Lab. This is a program that's near and dear to my heart. It is our partnership with the academic partners across Canada. So professors, PhDs, master's students at all Canadian institutions, universities. We offer grants of up to $50,000 for 2 years of research on a range of topics, from planning to urban design, economics, computer science, business technology, you name it. And we've partnered with some really excellent professors in the past. You can Google our New Mobility Lab Research Compendium to see the full document. So just a few highlighted here. Professor Bagazi was looking at automated vehicles and micromobility. Professor Wolf was looking at mobility as a service. Professor Mayboom was looking at the digital curbside for goods movement, both physical and digital integration. And we've even partnered with the University of Toronto, Professor Habib, on the impacts of ride hailing in Metro Vancouver on public transit services. And this is currently an ongoing project that we're really proud to work with with the university and with Professor Habib. As part of this program, we also put on an annual conference, the New Mobility Forum event. So in 2020, we had the theme of the promise and perils of automated transportation. We had some really excellent speakers. There were over 230 attendees. We had mayors and board members in attendance. We had a bunch of panel speakers. We had an exhibition showcase with different companies working on automation technology. In 2021, the theme was digital transformation, which was appropriate during the pandemic as many of us were working remotely. We had some really excellent discussion here around digital governance, so data management, urban data trusts, privacy, cybersecurity, these kind of things, which is probably very interesting for the folks attending this webinar today. Also looking at digital customer services. So again, that capacity information pilot was pertinent here, or digital freight management concepts like Professor Mayboom's digital curbside systems. And just this past month, we had our New Mobility Forum in person again. It was a hybrid event. You could also join virtually. It was so great to see people in person. The theme was electrification. So here you can see in the middle, we had one of our new electric buses. We invited exhibitors to showcase electric bikes, scooters. We even had motorcycles and electric vehicles for test driving in a plaza near Vancouver Convention Center, and some really excellent discussions on public transit, goods movement, shared fleets for micromobility and personal vehicles. And all of this was to support our Transport 2050 goals, our climate action strategy, and our low carbon fleet strategy. We also have the TransLink UBC Sustainability Scholars Program under the New Mobility Lab umbrella. So this is working with master's students at University of British Columbia in particular to partner for, I think it's a few months at a time, maybe 3 to 6 months, to look at very specific research projects that the organization is interested in pursuing. So topics in the past have included mobility hubs, behavioral insights, urban air mobility, blockchain, ACEs, data sharing, a lot of different things. Currently, we have a project looking at invisible freight. So thinking like Uber Eats, or people using their own vehicles to make deliveries, as well as another one on battery life cycle programs. So for our battery electric bus program, what is the end of life for those batteries? Will they have an end use? Can they be recycled? What is the environmental impact? So really important research projects going on through this program as well. And just wanted to wrap up here. I think I'm doing okay on time. Yeah, whether it's electric buses, micromobility, customer-facing applications, e-cargo, electric vehicles, fare integration, automation, goods movement using robots or electric vertical takeoff landing devices. There's a lot of fascinating technology coming out in the mobility space at the moment. It's a really exciting time, and it's a really pressing time. With the climate emergency, we have to act fast. We have to use these technologies to address our regional goals. But I wanted to remind everyone that technology is not always a silver bullet, and we should really be thoughtful about integrating these things to address real world issues, and always come back to our foundations of urban planning, which have more to do with prioritizing public transit, sustainable modes of travel like cycling and walking. And everyone's likely heard the old adage that the best transportation plan is a good land use plan. So transit-oriented development, using land value capture strategies to fund a lot of these projects, for example. And there's also, short-term low-cost solutions like pop-up plazas, reallocating street space for bike lanes or wider sidewalks, or transit. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you very much. And yeah, look forward to any questions or continuing to check out the presentations today. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Can you maybe unshare your screen? And you did that in a whirlwind tour, and we have lots of time. So I actually would like to make this more of a discussion sort of a more informal conversation to follow up on some of the specifics. As I mentioned, the collaboration is sort of it's one of the things that intrigues me the most. Transit is really not a research-oriented industry. It's an operations-driven industry. And there are very few examples around the world of collaborations or specific programs that involve both the transit agency and the research/academic community. I've been following this, monitoring this for a very long time, and it's just it's not a natural fit. It's not like high-tech industry. So now we're getting to a space where there is some intersection between them. But I'm curious about how so there are two programs. Well, I guess there are three programs. There's the lab, which was where you have your theme-specific solicitations every year. There's the academic program, can't remember the exact name for it, the sort of the grant program, and then there's the UBC sort of, I guess it's sort of more like a training program for the future. But the last two academic ones, how I know I think they were created before you started at TransLink, but I'm sort of curious if you knew how they got started, or since then, what's the reception by senior management is it, just how does it fit into the culture of the organization?
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, you make a good point that transit systems are primarily about providing services to customers, moving the most people the most efficiently as possible. I feel really lucky to work with an organization now that does prioritize partnerships with private sector or academics. I think the New Mobility Lab academic grant funding partnerships was established in part and parcel with the program or the team being put together. We're really fortunate to have institutions like UBC or SFU here in Metro Vancouver. SFU is looking at like hydrogen fuel cells, for example. There's recently been a huge investment in Burnaby to establish a hydrogen fuel cell research center. I heard someone from Germany who was visiting recently at one of our conferences refer to Burnaby as the Silicon Valley of hydrogen, which I just love to hear. So we have a lot of really smart people to work on these issues, and it's just a fantastic resource to have subject matter experts look into these things, because as you saw from my presentation, like it's such a wide array of technologies and business models, and for one person to be an expert in all of this is probably impossible. But in terms of how it's received by senior staff at TransLink, it's incremental, right? We're like a Titanic of an organization. Several thousand employees, a mayor's council, 23 mayors, a board of executives who direct funding allocations, et cetera. But the fact that we have a mandate to look into these innovation practices is really encouraging, and we are seeing some uptake, in terms of changes, slowly but surely. But it kind of goes back to that one of my initial slides about the process of like ideation to prototyping to scaling to integration to full programs, and it is a patient game. But it's worth pursuing, and I think we're making real improvements that impact customers and support our regional goals like climate and safety and affordability, et cetera.
That's great. There's a question, but it's on a specific topic, so I just might come back a little. I'll come back to Emmer's question, but the ideation. I mean, how do you come up with the themes? Is it just within your group, or do you have to vet them higher up or across?
Yeah, it's always curious. It's like, does it come out of like a magic hat? It's like pulling a rabbit out of a hat or something. It's not random. There's a kind of committee internally of like, what do they call it? Senior Leadership Council, something like that. And they'll kind of have these brainstorming sessions and, prioritize different ideas. And for like the open call for innovation, for example, each year they have to decide on a specific theme. And it's tough, right? Because all of this stuff has weight to it and can have a tremendous impact.
Yeah.
But we have to kind of focus it. And if I can even be like slightly critical of it, like decarbonizing transport is even still quite broad. That can mean a lot of things.
Yeah. So is that committee? That's not sort of the executive committee. That's sort of like a senior management, one layer below.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
so it's sort of like middle management, and then or middle seniors and middle management. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's good. Amber wanted to know a little bit more about the ODT pilot. You mentioned, I'm not familiar with it myself either. So.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's on-demand transportation.
Sorry, on-demand transit. Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, so this was TransLink's first, I believe, on-demand microtransit pilot project. It took place on Bowen Island, which is an interesting geographic location, just about 30-minute ferry ride offshore from the mainland, but has a population of, I think, around 2,000 to 4,000 people. And the roadways are also kind of fixed. There's not that many roads. So it was determined to be kind of an interesting case study to try out these on-demand shuttles. We partnered with a company to provide the application, the software platform. So customers could log into an app or call a hotline and order the shuttle to their address and then put in the destination where they wanted to go. And they were not on a fixed timetable. It was dynamic timetable and dynamic routing. So kind of like an Uber, but with like a microtransit shuttle. And the really interesting thing about on-demand transit is it's using this algorithm to prioritize pickups and drop-offs with multiple customers all at once, right? So it's this pretty neat system. Currently, I think it's been put on hold. There was a really positive response. Like all the customers loved it, obviously. I think the cost of operation is tricky. I think it's something that is typically more expensive than fixed route transit, but is typically integrated into a context where there is low ridership on the existing routes. So it's this weird kind of balancing act of figuring out the best way to provide services to customers based on population, frequency, ridership, these kind of data points. But yeah, currently it's on hold, and I know that many other municipalities have since asked for it, that everybody wanted it.
Yeah, Willem reminds us that he actually did a sort of a state of the practice report, which he put the link in, which did cover the TransLink project. And Ala, as this morning was presenting, she's developing guidelines for planning and the integration of ODT and fixed route, and it is very complicated. I mean, there was all that craze a couple of years ago when the TNCs started, and everybody said, "Oh, how cool Uber is," and so forth. But there's a serious societal discussion about what can society afford, and what's it worth. $30 a pop, it's not cheap, and so that is a bit of an issue. This is your programs represent a fairly significant investment, because just the staff time to organize these processes, to conduct them, to be available to provide data or respond to the questions, and then to read the reports is pretty significant. So I guess that's great that there seems to be the perception of the value to do that, because that's not an insignificant process, right?
Totally. Yeah. For the open call for innovation, again, for the private sector engagement, I mean, you can imagine how many proposals we receive from all sorts of companies. So yeah, it is tricky. There is an evaluation matrix that we've created. I think the tool is called MySpark. But it helps us to kind of rate and evaluate in a more systematic way. and organize these criteria into like a numeric weighting system. And we have multiple evaluators through different teams and departments.
Oh, yeah.
So it's system planning, or it's engineering, or it's finance, or it's procurement, or whoever can all have a say in this. But you're right, it's no easy feat, and it's tough because all of these tend to be pretty interesting ideas, but obviously like we only have so much capacity and funding to take on at a time.
So is it like, how many do you do a year? Like 3 or 4 through the call for topics?
I think it's like 1 to 2 is more accurate. Get actually selected for piloting.
Mm-hmm.
And the New Mobility Lab, the academic research partnerships, it's a bit more autonomous. We can lean on the professors and PhDs, which is great. So those we've done up to 4 in a year, but through the pandemic, we had some budget cuts, so we've reduced it slightly, but still great program.
For your information, in my paper, there was New York had started an open call like that based on themes. I think a couple of years before TransLink, but it was there are not very many places that do these sorts of things. That sort of an open call, and procurement wise, that's worked out because that tends to be doing sole source is not always it's not always looked upon positively by procurement people.
It's tricky, you're right, because they need to provide fair competition, right? We can't play favorites legally. So yeah, it is interesting. I know procurement is looking at, even like for the battery electric buses, for example, like leasing models. So as the battery technology improves, we're not sort of on the hook to keep them forever. But yeah, trying to improve flexibility in procurement is it's a challenge for sure.
It's one of the biggest challenges that's in any. There's been another trend is have chief innovation officers, or I think Los Angeles started that trend with their Office of Extraordinary Innovation, but an unsolicited proposal process. But it's challenging. It's the public sector has to have lots of rules for transparency and accountability, and that sort of is the contrary of private sector, where they can just sort of shake hands and do something. But